Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on success factors for embedded analytics every executive must know. My name is Michal Walkstock. I'm Director of Marketing here at Sisense, and I'm thrilled to have such a nice turnout for this webinar. I'm thrilled to have both Wayne Eckerson and Aviad Harell as speakers on this webinar, and I'll introduce them shortly. First, a few housekeeping items. The webinar will be recorded, and I will send that to you shortly after the webinar concludes. You can feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. There's a question chat box, and those will go directly to me, and I will pass them over to Wayne and Aviad at the end of the session. If you have any questions about how to get started or pricing or anything that isn't covered in this presentation, you can feel free to also add those into the chat box, and I'll get those handled afterwards, or you can email events@sisense.com. And now I'd like to introduce Wayne and Aviad. Wayne Eckerson has been a thought leader in the business intelligence and analytics field since the early 90s. He's a sought-after consultant and noted speaker and has conducted many research studies, including one of his latest on embedded analytics. He's a principal consultant at the Eckerson Group, a business technology consulting firm that helps business leaders use data and technology to drive better insights and actions. Aviad is one of Sisense's founders and now runs the Embedded Analytics Group at Sisense. And without further ado, I'll give presentation rights over to Wayne.
Thank you, Mikhail. I welcome everyone to this webcast. I'm really excited to talk to all of you today about embedded analytics, which I think in many respects is the future of business intelligence, and I'd like to make a case for that in the next 20 minutes or so. What I'll be covering is the basis of two reports that we recently released at Eckerson Group, one called Embedded Analytics, the Future of Business Intelligence, and the second, which embedded analytics product is right for you, where we kind of lay out the landscape for products and categorize them, and then map them to various user requirements. So I'm just going to give some highlights from those reports. We're going to talk about what is embedded analytics in case folks don't know or not completely clear about it, why you should embed analytics if you haven't already and make the business case for it. How do you do it? How do you get started if you have an interest in doing this, whether you're internal to a commercial organization or you're part of a vendor that sells software to others. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about tools and products in this space. Okay, so let's go on. So just to make sure everyone's on the same page, we should start by defining our terms. I always find that the most commonly used terms are the ones that people have the most confusion about. So here's the dictionary definition of embedded or embed, to fix an object firmly in a surrounding mass, or as we've learned lately from the wars in Iraq, to attach a journalist inside a military unit, an embedded journalist, so to speak. So how does this apply to our world? Well, in the analytics context, it really has two meanings. One simply is to insert a chart or report, or in fact an entire BI environment with its query engine, reporting engine, inside of another application, which could be a portal, could be an ERP or CRM application, or even a cloud application, which is becoming increasingly common. Something like Salesforce.com, one of the first cloud applications, now has all kinds of other applications that can be integrated with it or embedded in it. In this case, the analytical functions serve mostly for, I would say, operational reporting purposes, because you're doing analysis, you're running reports on the data that that application generates, unless it's a portal. And also, you may be using packaged analytics. If you're especially at Oracle or SAP or even Microsoft, an IBM customer, they sell major applications and they've developed packaged analytics to go with each of their functional operational modules. Now, the other instance of this is that with the tools today, like those from Sisense and others that are more platforms than tools, and we'll talk about the distinction later, you can embed by creating a complete custom analytic application on top of the BI platform. So it's not so much embedding, but beheading. So you basically lop off the user interface that comes with the tool and build your own using the APIs and SDKs that come with the BI platform. So many companies are starting to create these very rich custom analytic applications using new BI platforms like Sisense and others. And those could be something like a very customized tablet-based application for salespeople to use when they're on the road and preparing to go to a client site, and even when interacting with a client face-to-face. So that kind of custom analytic application that blends some transactional features, some forms, as well as analytical content is kind of the wave of the future, in my opinion. So I've already hinted at why you should embed, but let me just drill through these a little bit. One, you avoid context switching. So traditionally, with analytics and business intelligence, if you want to know what's going on, if you want insight, if you want to see the history of something or its forecast into the future, you have to go open a separate application, whether that's a report or a BI tool or a dashboard or something or other. So we've divorced the insight from the action. And as a result, this requires users to switch context between doing and analyzing. So obviously that comes with some time and just awkwardness from the user perspective. Also, when you embed analytics, number two here, you impel action because, one, they're not context switching. They're in the operational application that they spend most of their time in anyway. They can see the insights they need and then, without switching context, take action. Whether that's your inventory manager who's checking inventory levels can, over time and historically and against industry and seasonal trends, can automatically execute a purchase order from within that application. A doctor who's using an electronic health record or medical record program can look at a patient's health over time compared to industry averages, and within the application make a prescription or a referral as required. So in many ways, because of these things I've just mentioned, some people equate embedded analytics to closing the last mile of BI. I've always defined BI as turning data into insights and action. In the 90s, we focused on the data part of it, and that was the era of data warehousing. In the 2000s, we focused on the insights, and that kind of was the business intelligence and dashboard side of it. And I think today we're focusing on the action side of that mantra, turning data into insights and action. And taking action based on insights, that's the last mile of BI. That's closing the loop. And to be honest, if we don't take action, if we don't close the loop, then all the investments we've made in our data and analytics is all for naught. So finally, by putting BI or analytics at the fingertips of people using their core applications, operational applications, ERP, CRM, marketing, sales applications that they use each and every day intensively, we can make BI pervasive. And the ironic part is that as BI becomes pervasive, it starts to disappear. Because it's embedded, people really don't know that they're using a BI tool anymore. It's just part of the fabric of the application that they're doing most of their work in. So hopefully I've convinced you why you should embed and some of the benefits of it, and also what embedded analytics is. So let's move on to the evolution of BI and analytics, just to kind of further reinforce these notions. This chart I've used for many years to show how BI has evolved over time the kind of functionality that's been advanced every decade, and the increasing value it's providing. And interestingly, we've had alternated between delivering reports to casual users, predefined views of information, with analysis, which is more ad hoc, more exploratory, things that can't be defined in advance. And people have always asked me, well, what comes after the last wave here? And more recently, I've been saying that the next generation of BI is embedded, embedding reports and dashboards, as well as operationalizing analytical models and building them right into applications. Of course, we're all familiar with how Amazon generates automatic recommendations based on our buying history, and this is what I'm talking about with operationalizing predictive models to automate actions. And when we begin to embed reports and operationalize models, we really take a huge step towards turning data into a monetizable product. And this is a huge new trend in our space, where companies are realizing that data has value, either to sweeten the value of an existing application or service, or to generate additional revenue by making analytics and data available at extra cost. So we'll dive into that a little bit later in this presentation. So embedded analytics has evolved too. It's not new. It's been around as long as BI has been around. In fact, in the 90s, the most popular, widely used BI product was Crystal Reports, and it was so popular and widely used because it was embedded in almost every other software application or package that came along. But since the days of Crystal Reports, we've come a long way as BI, and certainly embedded analytics has evolved in much the same ways as BI and analytics as a whole. So in the 90s, the things that we embedded were essentially Windows-based desktop tools that delivered static reports from relational data. In the 2000s, everything moved to the web, including BI and analytics. We started delivering embedded analytics through fat clients, these plugins to browsers, generating more interactive reports and dashboards, as well as OLAP analyses from not just relational, but MDX-based data sources, as well as XML. And of course, today we've had this explosion in the world of analytics and BI. We now have these BI platforms that I mentioned that are increasingly and quickly moving to the cloud, where they can deliver analysis against any kind of data, not just relational, but NoSQL, data in Hadoop, streaming data, and data in cloud-based applications, and not only just deliver output in the form of reports and dashboards, but allow people to create their own reports and dashboards, or at least extend what's been made available, as well as start to do predictive and blended analytics. And if you look at the bottom half of this table, APIs are a critical part of how you embed analytics into applications, and our APIs have evolved from proprietary ones in the 90s to web-based standards like SOAP and iframes in the 2000s, to more modern types of APIs based on modern web standards like REST, JavaScript, jQuery, JSON, and other things like that. And back in the 90s, it was mostly software developers or developers at software vendors that were interested in embedding reports into their applications. But starting in the 2000s, and certainly today, it's not just software vendors that are doing the embedding, but it's also developers at commercial organizations, retailers, merchandisers, manufacturers, financial services firms, especially as they're delivering their own applications out to the marketplace to service their suppliers, their partners, or their customers. And the pricing, as you might imagine, has changed. Traditionally, user-based pricing in the 90s, that started to change into server-based pricing as the scalability of BI and analytics products increased. And today with embedded analytics, especially in this realm of data monetization, we're starting to see the advent of value-based pricing, where we're not going to charge you right now for using this or buying or integrating this analytics functionality because you can't estimate how many external customers, suppliers, or partners you might have, but we'll charge you as you grow that base, and as you increase the number of users using this utility, this analytics utility, we'll charge you accordingly. So that's kind of what value-based pricing is. It could be based on any number of factors, from revenues to number of customers to number of workspaces deployed, among other things. Just to dive in a little bit deeper on how you actually embed analytics from an architectural perspective. Back in the 90s, we started out by simply just bundling a BI tool into a software package. You had to install it separately, manage it separately, and it had its own graphical user interface. That's kind of how Crystal Reports started. But very quickly it moved from kind of a bundled embedding approach to what I would call more like a coexistence, where the BI tool was embedded as libraries alongside the application libraries that ran the host application. But those libraries still had to be managed and upgraded separately, which created a lot of headaches. And certainly the output, or the BI tool, had its own look and feel that didn't look anything like the host application. So you knew you were dealing with a separate set of code when you were doing reporting inside of another application. This changed quite a bit in the 2000s. The web and URL type integration made embedding a lot easier. We could now run BI separately from the host application, kind of in a loose coupling arrangement, so that you could upgrade the BI server separately from the host application without having any conflicts. Here, in this modular approach, BI basically becomes a module inside another application. It runs as a separate tab or page. And now the BI vendors have offered some capability to do white labeling. That is to change the logo on the BI tool, change the headers and footers, the background colors, the fonts, the help menu, and things like that, to make it conform more to the look and feel of the host application. So tools that did this the best, the users or customers of the host application may not really know that they're using the third-party tool at this point. And then we had the advent of iframes. And here we're actually not running BI as a separate module in its own space, but we're actually kind of embedding BI functionality inside a page of the application. So it sits within or side by side the application itself. But the problem with iframes is that they're kind of a closed box. So what happens in the iframe doesn't affect what happens outside the iframe, and vice versa. People had a lot of headaches trying to update the iframe, like when a user did a simple action, like say hit the back button. Well, the analytic functionality inside the iframe never went backwards to the previous state because it's a completely separate environment, just running inside of the host application. Now this has changed a lot in this decade. Thanks to more modern, richer APIs, we have what I would call inline embedding. This is where the host application or web page calls BI functions via JavaScript or REST APIs, creating a custom analytic GUI inside the host application. So much tighter embedding. Users really don't know that they're using a third-party tool. And again, the BI environment is still loosely coupled, running typically on its own server or side by side on the same server as the host application. And finally, what we're moving to now is this state of fusion. Thanks to the increasingly richer APIs that BI vendors are offering, as well as software development kits that allow users to extend the capabilities of those platforms and things. We can create two-way integration between BI tools and host applications. So an analytic application can, based on the state of what's being displayed, automatically update the host application by sending a SQL query or executing a stored procedure without leaving that analytical view. So two-way, bidirectional integration where the two applications are fused and in many cases create something completely new. All right, so that's just a little bit of a history on embedded analytics, what it means for the analytics industry, how it's evolved over time, and architecturally how it works to some degree. I think the big question for all of you out there is, well, I'm interested, what do I do to get started? A lot about embedding is not that different than just purchasing a BI tool and implementing it for your own internal users, except the use cases are more varied, as I mentioned in the outset. You can start to use this to distribute analytics, reports, dashboards, predictive capabilities, and self-service analytics to your customers, suppliers, and partners. So it's really imperative, and more so with embedded, to know your own environment. And that really starts with knowing who your users are, both today and where they might be in the next 2-3 years. Are they internal only, or are they external? Obviously, if they're external, it might be harder to really define their requirements, but it's imperative that you do so. Otherwise, you might be spending too much money to add too much functionality to your BI environment that none of your users will use, and so the ROI of your investment may be compromised. When you look at the types of users, it's important to know, do they just want to view static reports? Do they want to navigate through interactive reports and dashboards? Do they want to create new versions of those reports by adding dimensions and fields that may not have been exposed from the report model? Or do they want to add completely new data sets to them and even do things like predictive and forecasting capabilities? So understanding what users really want to do with data, how they want to manage and manipulate reports and dashboards, how much self-service they want, this is really critical because this will determine what kind of functionality you need to look for in an embedded BI product. And I assume at this point that you're going to use a commercial BI product instead of trying to build these by yourself, which doesn't make sense in this day and age unless you have a very, very simple environment that has, like in Eckerson Group, we have our own assessment tool, and we have one report with one chart. So we would, in that case, you know, embedding a BI or analytics tool is a little bit of overkill. But for most situations, going with a commercial tool is important. And from there, you need to understand, well, what are the capabilities of that commercial tool, which we'll get to. But essentially, you need to map the user requirements to types of analytical functionality. And I think I've talked about these mostly, type charts, reports. Do they want, how much ad hoc do they want to do? Do they want to mash up their own data? Do they want to connect to their own data sources? Do they want to do predictive and prescriptive? Many leading BI environments today and tools support the full range of BI capabilities listed here, among others as well. You also need to understand the data that you will be delivering through these analytic engines. Is it structured data or unstructured or some combination? How detailed is it, or is it simply aggregated data? This makes a big difference in terms of the volume of data. So a lot of tools do very well with small volumes of data, but big data can be a stretch. And the laws of physics eventually take over, and you'll have to choose between performance and scalability. And every vendor has a different way of blending those two to get the best of both worlds, but there's always compromises. So you need to understand how the architecture makes that trade-off. Then finally, understand, well, what's the nature of the host application you want to embed analytics into, unless you're creating complete custom analytic applications, as I mentioned at the outset. Is this something you built internally, or is it a packaged application? Is it run only on premises, or does it run in the cloud, or some mix? What's the client? Is it a desktop? Is it browser? Is it mobile, or a combination? And what's the underlying operating environment, .NET, Java, or Unix? So these all have a impact on what tools you might bring to bear to embed inside your application. From there, you need to start looking at vendor products themselves. I've listed 12 key capabilities that you should look at here, and I think the top 6 are most germane for the embedded world. We already talked about functionality that's supported, at least from an end-user perspective. But after that, probably the most important thing is how rich is the API, and how well documented is it? Does the API allow you to extend what's already there in terms of visualizations, list selectors, menus, and things of that sort? We talked about white labeling. Some products are better than others in terms of the extent of white labeling you can do with a point-and-click interface versus having to go in and rewrite the cascading style sheets. Number 4, vendor services. This is really important. If your vendor has a track record of helping companies embed analytics into their products, that's a good thing, because it's not easy. And once you embed something, you're typically going to customize it to some degree. And we'll talk about this a little later, and that can create some headaches down the road. But I've seen some of these deployment efforts take months and months to roll out, because there's a lot of things that you have to figure out if you're going to use analytics to touch your customers or partners or suppliers. And throw on that, if you're going to monetize this analytical output, how do you do that? How do you price it? How do you tier it? Or do you charge for it at all? So a lot of questions to be answered, and a vendor who's been there before is an immense help. Extensibility, I've mentioned. No product out of the box is going to meet your needs 100%. You want to get probably close to 90, 95%, but that last 5 to 10% you'll have to customize, right? So the question is, how extensible is the product out of the box? Does it offer a software developer kit so that you can, say, create a new data connector, create or modify a visualization to get just what you want, create new calculations and analytics for users, and so on and so forth. So extensibility is really important, because when you embed, you really are working with your core customers and suppliers, and that's your core revenue stream or supply chain stream, and you don't want to jeopardize that. Also, security is a huge issue. You certainly do not want users to have to log in once to the host application and then again to the analytic application. So you need tools that support single sign-on out of the box. And most importantly, you want tools that can, out of the box, adopt your host application security model and pick the access controls that might come from LDAP or Active Directory, and apply them to the BI environment so that users aren't able to access data at the row and column level that they're not authorized to see. And you don't even want them to see, drop downs that they shouldn't see as well. So that level of security integration is something you really need to investigate closely to make sure that it's not going to create this little time bomb that explodes the whole thing. And then for the rest of these, it's pretty standard. We talked a little bit about the architecture, the balance between performance and scalability. There's other trade-offs that you should look at, number of data sources that it supports, the ability to go after new sources if one that you need isn't supported. How does it transform data, because no data at the source system is exactly going to be what users want. Does it do pass through or drill through transformations at the source? Does it pull the data into its own repository and then allow you to do transforms there? Or does it allow you to do transforms in the BI tool itself through mashups and data wrangling capabilities? We talked about scalability and performance. Real time, how frequently can it update or refresh data? Are users expecting to deal with the most up-to-date real-time data possible, or is day-old data acceptable? And what does the tool support? And then finally, pricing. We did talk about this, but especially if you're a software vendor looking to monetize data, you don't want to make a huge upfront investment in a BI tool only to realize that this is not generating any revenue or new business for you. So this value-based pricing that I mentioned, that's based on your success using the analytics to drive new business, to support new customers, is I think where it's headed. And it might mean something simply as a low upfront price point and then a royalty stream, although I haven't really heard of any vendor doing that yet, but a royalty stream based on the revenues that they're actually generating from the embedded capabilities. Okay, so I'm going to have to go a little bit faster here. Just did a little time check. There's three categories of tools that you can embed for BI. One is components, the other is tools, and the final is platforms, which we've talked about. Components are individual objects like visualizations. It could be list selectors, controls, things like that. These are piece parts that a developer would use to build an application from scratch or extend an existing application. So if you're in the buy side of things, you're definitely going to be using components, many of which are now open sourced and free, like the D3 visualization libraries, but there's others that are much more functional that you pay for. BI tools have always been tools that is purpose-built for a specific BI function, such as dashboards, reports, OLAP, scorecards. And not until recently have vendors pulled all those functions together into a single unified environment, which we now call a platform. Tools, you kind of got what you got, you could embed them for sure, but they kind of looked and felt like the BI tool. With a platform, when you embed those, because of the richness of the APIs and SDKs, you can create a completely custom environment, either within a host environment or on top of the platform itself. And you have to assess fit, as we said, when you start to match your requirements to the capabilities of the tools. How much customization do you need to do to that tool to get it to where you need it to be? And then what happens when you have to upgrade the host application, or the BI, you want to upgrade the BI functionality? How do you upgrade something that's been customized? That's always been the pain of the ERP world, and it's also true in the analytics world. And then finally, this is a kind of a data monetization maturity curve, and shows how you can gain monetary value from embedded analytics, or just analytics in general, starting with distribute analytics internally. That's just BI as we've done it for the last 20, 30 years. Obviously, you can gain improvements in efficiency in terms of getting users access to data to make decisions. The second stage is to distribute analytics externally to your customers and suppliers. And these extranet BI environments have been all about pushing custom reports out to users. That's kind of old school now. Now because of the web, we bring users to our website and embed analytics into our web application, which is the third stage, essentially. And then the fourth stage is when we start to operationalize our analytical models inside those core applications as well. So we not only have the reports and dashboards, now we have analytical models that can sometimes be executed in real time to generate recommendations and suggestions and alerts. And then finally, we can actually create and sell data products, and that can be any number of things. One client I had, Blue Shield of Kansas City, took their data warehouse and analytical environment, turned it inside and out, and now sells analytical services from a consulting perspective and kind of outsourcing perspective to other hospitals and healthcare providers. But you can do something more simple and just sell data to users within an analytical environment. So syndicate data via subscriptions. So this is a data monetization maturity curve. It's probably new to a lot of you to think about monetizing data. Some of you may be doing this, and if you are, I'd love to hear about it. But I do think this is the next wave of analytics. So in conclusion, to understand the potential of embedded analytics for you, understand what your internal customers need from a data and insight perspective, as well as your external customers. Understand the capabilities of vendor products, what functionality do they offer, how rich are their APIs and SDKs, what kind of consulting and support services can they provide to steer you down that path, and then map products to your requirements to find the best fit for today and the future. So with that, I am going to hand it back to Mikal, and she will introduce our next speaker.
I'm waiting for those presentations to come. Great, it's going straight to Aviad. So Aviad, I'll let you take it from here.
Hi everyone, I'm Aviad Harell. First of all, I would like to thank Wayne for the excellent and insightful presentation, so thank you for that. So as I mentioned, my name is Aviad Harell. I'm one of the founders of Sisense and currently acting as VP of OEM and Field Engineering. We founded Sisense in 2004 in a quest of changing the way business intelligence users are using, maintaining, and deploying business intelligence solutions. We created a platform that empowers business users to take ownership of the entire BI project by themselves. In order to do that, we introduced a platform that has both sides of the equation, the data preparation capabilities and the visualization. We came to a conclusion that it's mandatory to have both sides of the equation in order to really empower someone to take ownership of the entire value chain of BI solutions. So this is exactly what we did. Currently, we have about 1,000 customers spread in around 50 countries around the globe. We won many awards. We were ranked top 2 by
Aviad, let me just jump in. I'm not seeing your slide move forward. Just wanted to mention that. Maybe it's just me.
Sorry. So as I said, we have about 1,000 customers spread around 50 countries. We won many awards. Would like to mention 2 of them. We were ranked top 2 by Gartner for business benefits, ease of use, customer renewals, and large data volumes. Recently, we won, or Dresner recognized Sisense as the leader, and received the perfect recommended in Dresner 2016 Wisdom of the Crowds report. So this is a little bit overview of Sisense. I would like to continue Wayne's thoughts and description of embedded analytics and to focus it on Sisense a little bit and how Sisense is doing it and why Sisense is very valuable in providing embedded analytics capabilities to our customers. So to begin with, currently Sisense has 40% of our customers comes from OEM customers, and few of them are the biggest companies in the world. I've listed 6 points that I think that make Sisense very valuable for users that are looking to embed analytics into their platform and that communicate directly with all the points that Wayne described. I'll start with the embeddability. So obviously, when one is interested in embedding software into his product, you need to make sure that you have all the relevant embeddability capabilities. In Sisense, we have everything that Wayne described, in particular the fusion and the inline capabilities of embeddingness. You can embed either a specific widget or set of widgets or entire dashboard or the entire environment into an existing product. There is a vast spectrum of APIs that empowers product manager and implementers to interact or create an interaction between the embedded parts of Sisense and the product that hosts those elements in many ways. The next item that I think is very valuable is the full customization and white labeling. So in Sisense, when we developed the product, we chose an approach that I refer to as API first. API first approach means that when we developed the product, every feature we started by developing a set of API set. Later on, we took that API set and we used it in order to create the actual product. More important, later on, we expose those API elements or API calls to our users, so they will be empowered to enrich, customize, and solutionize Sisense platform. And those are 3 pillars that I would like to further elaborate a little bit. So customization is the ability to take existing widget or existing dashboard and to customize it in a way that it will look more related to the hosting application in terms of the look and feel. So we have rich API sets that enables users to do so. Enrichment is a different pillar of customization. That means that a user would like to add or to enrich the capabilities of existing component in our solution, such as a dashboard or a widget. There is another API set, a very rich API set that empowers that user to do so. And solutionization relates again to what Wayne described earlier, is the ability to take Sisense and to create a solution on top of it, or in other words, to use Sisense as one of the building blocks in building a bigger solution. So this is in regards to the full customization. White labeling, there's no reason to focus on it because in our modern times it should be commodity, obviously for embedded platform. It's very easy and native to Sisense to have a full white labeling to its solutions. I will go to the next item, which is mobile embeddability. You know that in our modern times, mobile is becoming more and more common around every platform that you're facing. Sisense has elaborated mobile capabilities. The embeddingness relates to the mobile application and mobile capabilities as well. So users can take their own mobile apps and embed Sisense widget within those mobile apps. Minimize hardware costs. So one module in Sisense platform is called Elastic Cube Server. Elastic Cube Server is a very powerful best-of-breed analytical server that empowers its users to connect to multiple data sources by themselves, pull data from those data sources, mesh it up together to one unified data mart, so to speak, and in a very easy and intuitive way allows them to crunch the data very easily. A very important pillar of Elastic Cube server is the fact that it runs on commodity hardware. So in other words, Elastic Cube server ability to process data on a given machinery is incomparable to any other technology, and it can process much more data on a given machinery. This is crucial when you're talking or thinking about scale. Scale is a very important item for embedded analytics. Whatever solutions that you choose, you need to make sure you completely understand what's the scale considerations of the embedded solutions that you incorporate into your product. Minimal operational costs. It relates to the fact that Sisense introduced a very simplistic way to implement the full value chain of the BI project that makes it very efficient in terms of the skill set, the machinery, and time to market of the implementation itself, which is, again, a very crucial part of consideration when you're looking into embedded analytics. The last item that I would like to touch in terms of one of the great values of Sisense as an embedded analytic platform is the time to market. Whenever you're thinking of embedding whatever platform into your product, you need to understand what it takes in order to implement that platform to your product. It's an obvious thing, but also you need to make sure that you understand what it takes to create more content in the embedded application in your product, or to change existing deliverables in that application. We all know that when you introduce a product to the market, you will get a lot of feedback, and a product that is not evolving is a dying product. Same goes to the embedded part of that product, or the embedded analytics of that product. Under that assumption, you need to understand that the analytical part, the embedded analytical part of your product will constantly be changed and evolve. So you need to make sure that the platform that you are using for embedded analytics allows you very quick cycles of implementation and adjustment to the existing deliverables. Sisense, due to the fact that we invested in both sides of the equation, as I mentioned earlier, the data preparation part together with the visualization part makes the value of the implementation of the project very, very agile and quick, which makes the cycles very, very short, and it contributes tremendously to the time to market and the time to adjust existing solution into the hosting product. After talking about the value of Sisense as embedded analytics, I would like to talk about a few use cases. So as I mentioned earlier, Sisense, more than 40% of Sisense use cases are around embedded analytics. A few of them by the biggest companies in the world. You can see a few of them in the slide here. I would like to talk about two of them that will give you some insights on different kind of embedded analytics implementation. So I'll start with one of our customers called Known Factors. Known Factors is a veteran BI consultancy. It uses embedded BI to meet the needs of all their clients, most interestingly, those from political world who want to visualize data that's relevant to voting districts and perform analysis related to demographic among voters. The data that they're collecting and analysis that they're providing, they're giving it to politicians mostly, and campaigns or political campaigns, and it become very efficient for those kinds of cases. The next one is a very cool company called Boostin. Boostin is an innovative hotel management solution for small and medium hotel chains in the hotel industry. were struggling with scattered, inconsistent data sets and lack of centralized IT systems and resources. By embedding Sisense in their hotel service solution, Boostin has helped their customers analyzing sales data of guests to reveal insights about the behavior of guests, such as where they're dining and what utilities they are using, in order to configure smart responses and proper improvement, optimization, and customer experience. So I tried to select two different use cases of Sisense that they used Sisense for completely different industries and use cases. The one common denominator between those two use cases is the value that Sisense provided them in terms of the embedding capabilities, and it relates back to the 6 items that I've described earlier. So this is it basically. Thank you very much, and I'll hand over the controls to Michal.
Absolutely. Are you passing those over? I can. There we go. Thank you so much for those presentations. They were really very interesting. We have a few questions coming in here. Actually, before I get into the questions, Sisense is available for a 14-day free trial. So you can download it yourself and bring in your data sources and have dashboards up really easily. As we said, it's a self-serve tool, so you should be able to get that running quite quickly. Also, if you have any questions, you can send it to events@Sisense. If not, if you don't want them handled, if they're not specific to this webinar. Okay, so the first question I'm going to, I guess this is for Aviad. Can you walk through how the clients actually use Sisense? Still struggling to understand how Sisense works. I guess so in a little bit more detail, what it actually means to pull in Sisense into an application.
So I think if I understand correctly, you refer to how the implementation process of Sisense into an existing product looks like. So referring to that, like every product development, the embedded capabilities that one would like to enrich his products with requires some product planning. The product planning requires understanding the business case that you would like to add to your product, and then break it down to smaller business questions. After you understand the business questions that you would like your analytics to serve, you're able to start the implementation itself. For every business question, you need to start with the data, or preparing the data that relates to that business question. With Sisense, it's the ElastiCube. So you design an ElastiCube that holds the data that relates to that specific business question. After you design that ElastiCube, and this is something that takes short period of time, I'm talking about, let's say, a few hours in most of the cases, then you jump to the visualization part to create the actual analytics or the dashboard or the widget themselves. So based on the business question and the data that you gathered into your ElastiCube, now you're creating the set of widgets that analyze or answer the business questions. Once you're done with the first business question, you're moving to the next one. When you do so with Sisense, that process is very, very agile and very, very quick. So you go back to your ElastiCube, you enrich the existing ElastiCube with extra data that relates to the second business questions, and then you go back again to the visualization part, enrich the existing dashboard with few widgets that analyze or answer the second business question, and you go on and on with that process until you're covering all your business questions. This is what we call in Sisense the iterative process. It's very similar to the modern development methodologies in most of R&Ds around the globe currently. It's called agile development. So in other words, Sisense introduced agile business intelligence project implementation to the market, and something very efficient that has two main values. One, first time to market, and secondly, the fact that you are prompt with result very, very quickly, because you take the entire business case, you break it down to smaller or very small business questions, you implement each one of them by itself, isolated, and by doing so, you see the results of the project before you're done with the entire project. This is something very important and very appealing to many product house in many, many companies.
Great, thanks so much. Another question to elaborate a little bit about the ETL capabilities in Sisense.
Okay, so I mentioned earlier that Sisense platform consists of two parts, the data preparation part and the data visualization part. The ETL capabilities relates to the data preparation part. As I mentioned earlier, Elasticube Server, which is a major part of the Sisense platform, is a best-of-breed analytical server that enables or empowers business users to connect to multiple data sources by themselves. So if I relate to what Wayne mentioned earlier, we have a long list of native data connectors: SQL Server, Oracle, Microsoft Analysis Services, Zendesk, Salesforce, Redshift, Hadoop Hive, Teradata. It's a never-ending list of connectors. Business users can use those native connectors to connect to those data sources, pull data elements from those data sources, big amounts of data if necessary. It's very intuitive with Sisense, and then mesh it up together in Elasticube in a very straightforward and intuitive way that makes it, I won't call it transparent, but easily manageable by business users. On top of that, you have some extra ETL capabilities we've incorporated into the data preparation capabilities in the form of the ability to create custom columns on the existing tables that you pull from the different data sources, and custom tables, the ability to create a logical table in the Elasticube schema based on the data you pull from the different data sources.
Perfect. I'm trying to think. We're going to do, I think, just one more because time is really getting ahead of us. And then if there are any additional questions, we'll be happy to answer those offline. I think we're going to do this one for Wayne. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on the ROI of embedded analytics? I think you mentioned it, but there's a few questions about clarifying where that ROI would actually be coming from.
Yeah, you know, that's a good question. I didn't study that exclusively. Because ROI with BI or analytics in general is hard to do. We've been trying to figure out that ROI for decades now.
Okay, so maybe Aviad, do you want to take it instead?
So, sorry, please go on, Wayne.
Yeah, I would.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, in general, people who understand it's important to deliver insights to business users to make decisions just know the intuitive value and ROI of doing that. But on the embedded side, we do have the ability to actually generate revenue if this scenario applies to you, where you can start to sell analytics and dashboards and data sets to your customers or suppliers, either to increase the price of your existing product or service or to provide you know, add-on options to that. So in some senses, we can quantitatively define the ROI of embedded analytics if we go the data monetization route. But in terms of, you know, market studies, I don't have any data.
I would like maybe a different way to look at it. First of all, I agree with Wayne. It's very hard to see very accurate ROI of embedded analytics. But another way to look at it might be the following. So if I'm a product manager of a specific product and I'm looking for, or I'm thinking of embedding analytics into my product, I can see revenue or value or revenue value out of it in the following areas. One is new customers, or I call it conversion rate. I mean, I'm approaching customers. I'm approaching prospects, sorry. I lost few of them because I don't have analytic part of my product. If I add the analytic part of my product, then my conversion rate from prospect to customer is increasing. So this is one way that might give you ability to understand specific side or dimension of the ROI. Second one is retention. So I might be losing few of my existing customers because of lack of analytical capabilities in my product. So if I add embedded analytics into my product, my retention rate will be better. This is another dimension that enables me to calculate ROI. And last thing that I think that will give you the ability to calculate ROI is increase of price. So I have a product that I'm selling for X amount of dollars in an annual subscription model. Now I'm adding new capabilities to the product, analytics capabilities. I either ask for more money for the product because the value of the product is higher, or I make the analytics part of the product that I now incorporated into my product a chargeable feature. So every customer of mine that would like to have it needs to pay more money. So this is another dimension that will enable me to calculate ROI as well.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Wayne and Aviad, I appreciate very much your time and giving over this webinar. As I mentioned, the webinar was being recorded and it will be sent to you. Again, I'll leave the webinar open a little bit longer so you can feel free to submit questions that we'll answer offline or by email. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you.